You should all know by now just how much I enjoy the Macross series. There have been a number of video games within the Macross brand as well, including the somewhat iffy Do You Remember Love on the PS1 and Saturn, and the awesome Scrambled Valkyrie on the Super Famicom.
Right around the beginning of Macross itself lies the Famicom game, simply titled Macross. This specific game would see more or less wide distribution through pirated multicarts despite not seeing an official release in North America.
Developed by Namco and published by Ban-Dai, it's a really early licensed game, but is it worth a second glance? Let's take a closer look. Not too many creative liberties have been taken with the Macross property in this particular horizontal shooter. Movement of your ship, called the Valkyrie, is your basic 8-way fare, and the B button is relegated to firing your main weapon. You can also activate the series trademark Missile Swarm by pressing the Select button. Your missile stock can grow to a fairly large quantity over time, either through stage completion or M pickups, but the fun really begins with the A button.
Pressing the A button with a specific directional key pressed down will allow the Valkyrie to change forms, which affects your speed and rates of fire. Holding up from Fighter and Battleoid will change to Gear Walk with slower scroll speed, quicker movement, and rapid fire. Pressing back an A from Gear Walk or Fighter will activate Battleoid mode with the slowest scroll speed, but the fastest movement and the ability to fire to the rear. Pressing forward an A will change you back to Fighter with non-rapid fire and the fastest scroll speed, but with the slowest ship movement.
Usually the Gear Walk mode will suffice you, but the stages you'll be playing are better cleared quickly, so using the Fighter to blast through the stages is a good tactic, switching to Gear Walk or Battleoid when the situation calls for it. With a fast trigger thumb, it's possible to fire faster than the Gear Walk or Battleoid's rapid shot while in Fighter mode as well.
Battleoid mode is a bit too fast and inaccurate to really be useful though. It's possible that some players out there might be able to use it better than we could, but since it's a lot taller than the other forms, it's also more likely that you'll get nailed with more enemy shots or even the enemies themselves, which will deplete your energy harshly.
Thankfully, there are usually P icons that allow for energy to be refilled if you happen to have lost some over time or through shot or craft collisions. These pickups do recover a considerable amount of energy, though not fully. Obviously, to get to the end of the stage with as much energy as possible is the way to go.
Stage progression is pretty simple. Fly through a swath of various and try the opposition until you can reach the battlecruiser, which you enter. Within the cruiser, a timer starts in which you must destroy the core. From there, the next round starts. Pretty simple stuff.
But Macross is a lot like many of Hudson's caravan shooters from the 80s in that there is no actual end to the game. It will go as far as you can given the skill, and while there is no extend score, random E pickups will grant an extend. Given this, Macross is little more than a score chaser. Great for a competition piece thanks to its sharply rising difficulty curve, but outside of getting better and better at what will basically be the same stage over and over, your mileage might vary.
The scoring in Macross is pretty simple. Basically, destroying as much as possible will be the best way to get as high a score as possible. Nothing especially fancy there.
There will be times that you'll find a B pickup on your way through the stage. This is a bonus pickup for 5,000 points to boost your score. You will also be able to get a sizable bonus after destroying the battleship core, if you can do so with as much time and energy as possible. Again, more or less very basic and not especially engaging on the whole.
One neat thing that Macross does that makes for a great feature in competitions is a special tone for when the high score is beaten. Having an audio cue rather than just a word popping up allows for a player to concentrate on their game rather than always checking their digits. Cool stuff.
Presentation-wise, Macross is pretty shallow. Macross has always had a rich mythos when it came to the anime and many of its games, so the lack of any real story in the game or any integration into the series is a pretty big letdown.
Visually, the game is pretty average, with no real animation on the enemy sprites and only just enough to give us the impression that a cool transformation is happening with the Valkyrie. The exploding background is a nice touch though.
There isn't a lot of music in this game, but what is here is still solid, if repetitive. Lin-Min Mei's Little White Dragon plays in the background of each round, while the title, stage, and game over jingles are all original, though brief.
There isn't a lot to say about the sound effects here either. With only a handful of different effects, it really starts to sound very repetitive very quickly overall. Not especially great.
Still with fairly solid score chase mechanics, Macross still manages to be fairly playable despite the wasted potential presentation-wise. But how does it stack up? Let's take a look. While the fighter and gearwalk modes in Macross are mostly decent, the Battloid form is way too fast and easy to get hit with to be truly usable.
These controls can be pretty frustrating on the outset, and will take some getting used to.
Macross will get plenty difficult in its later stages, which is to be expected of a game that goes on forever.
This game sure doesn't like you too much. It's pretty aggressive.
With no real end, Macross will go as far as you can.
Personally, I kinda like endings to my games. But for score chasers, this is the kind of game that could possibly last a while.
Basic but solid overall, the visuals here do the job nicely enough.
The graphics here are far from flashy, but this is early Famicom.
The sound here is a mixed bag. The music is passable, but the sound effects can be a little too repetitive.
Little White Dragon on infinite repeat might be enough to drive anyone a little mad.
There isn't a lot here that really stands out in any real way. Despite being a solid score chaser, this is quite easily one of the most basic shooters there is.
There's not really anything to Macross outside of its variable transformations, and even then, they're more or less identical.
If you're into score chasing and you like the idea of doing it with a Valkyrie in the most basic way, Macross will certainly strike your fancy. It's far from technical, but it's good to bust out for a simple, no-frills competition piece regardless. Macross gets a 3 out of 5. Macross is also very affordable. Card-only auctions often go for under $10, while complete and box listings will often go for twice that or more, depending on condition. That said, if you love Macross and you'd like to play this simple oldie, it won't break the bank if you're just in it for the cart.
Much as possible will be the best way to get as high a score as possible. Higher?